Ben Silva, how you doing, brother? Welcome to the stream.
Hey, not too bad. Let me just make sure I'm not get the blinding sunlight behind me.
You're good, brother. How you doing today?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Not too bad, not too bad. I was just letting the people know what you do, what you've done, all that stuff. You work for Headline USA. I forget, do you work for the Libertarian Institute or like with them occasionally?
Yeah, I consider myself a contributor. So occasional freelance articles, and obviously I'm doing this big book project, but I'm not like a full-time employee or anything like that.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, and I was telling them about that, and you're gonna come on in about 2 weeks or so to talk about that with the Trump assassination attempt, which
Yeah.
I'm very excited about because I was telling them I love every time I'm like scrolling through Twitter and I see your tweets pop up, and it's always just like you're talking about a lot of the stuff everyone's talking about, but you always have sort of this thing that I go like, well, I don't see anyone saying that. The hell's that over there? Stuff like that. So that's why I wanted to get you on to talk about the Epstein situation. I don't even know exactly what to say. Just basically, um, it feels like basically more of the same, but they're more blatant and worse at lying. What out of all the stuff you've sort of seen in the past 2 days that it's been since they, said there's no client list and it was definitely a suicide. What was like the thing that popped out to you that was like the most blatant of lies? I guess, probably the the didn't commit suicide, but I guess in like the nitty gritty, what was the thing that popped out the most that was just like, oh, that I know for a fact that that's just bullshit?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I should start off by qualifying that I'm not an expert in the Jeffrey Epstein case. I never presented myself as one, unlike the Trump shooting, which I would consider myself kind of like the leading reporter. But when you asked me to come on the show yesterday, I started thinking, well, like, damn, I've been paying attention to the Epstein case for like 8 years now. I've been writing about it for like 5 or 6 years now. I followed all the lawsuits, read all the reports. So even though I wouldn't consider myself an expert, just diligently following all the lawsuits, I guess, puts me above most of other reporters, especially in the Con Inc. sphere. So, yeah, to get that out of the way, to answer your question, the most egregious lie that's told to us is about this video footage where they say, we've got footage of Epstein's cell that's going to demonstrate that nobody went in or out that whole night and that he was alone. But I've been sharing that diagram from a inspector general's report that shows all the cameras in the entire wing of Jeff Epstein's floor, and all the cameras that showed the spots that mattered weren't recording. The only camera that they released is like shows a tiny sliver of a stairwell leading up to Epstein's cell. Obviously, anybody sneaky could have, used the part of the stairwell that wasn't on the camera. And moreover, Epstein's wing, which is just like one hallway of maybe a dozen cells, there were like 3 or 4 other inmates in that wing where the guards never went there the whole night. So if they left all the doors unlocked, those other inmates could have attacked Epstein or something like that could have happened, and we'll never know about it because the camera in that hallway wasn't recording.
Yeah, and wasn't it a situation too where they were oh yeah, you said that the cameras weren't recording, but then magically we have like 10 hours of this one camera and it do you think like so I was talking about this yesterday on stream. Do you think the fact that they released that one camera with like you see two doors right in the front, do you
Yeah,
think that was like an intentional thing for people who aren't really paying attention? Or like
totally.
or into it, yeah.
Totally. I think it's a numbers game where they realize that people paying attention are going to know they're full of shit. But, we live in a democracy and there's millions and millions of voters who literally don't even know how to read, let alone, pay attention to this stuff. So, yeah, it might seem so obvious. Like, how could they be doing this right in front of our faces? But we're in the minority of the minority. We're like in the less than 1% of the electorate. Well, I don't vote, but less of the 1% of the population that actually can decipher this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all very interesting because yeah, when like cuz I feel like I know a decent amount, but I don't even know probably half that the people who would like say they know some stuff, but I even like I was watching that just like, well, wait, I remember they said the cameras weren't working. So this can't be. I'm like literally thinking about it in real time. I was like, this can't be his cell. And then as I'm thinking that, I see an officer walk out the door and I go, okay, so that's a hallway.
Yeah.
And then I was like, do they have his cell right next to the hallway? And I was like, oh no, that can't be it. And then you watch it and you realize like, oh, it's actually, there's a grainy. Oh, that was another thing I was talking about. Can you believe how bad it like the more I'm not trying to be schizophrenic, but it's like the more you just say it out loud, the more you're like, I mean, that has to be intentional. They can't be that stupid, but like how bad the camera footage is.
Yeah, exactly. So you said a couple things there. I guess I'll start with that door. It looks like, you get the impression that that's a camera on the cell door. And, what I'm working off of is a 2023 Inspector General's report, which determined that, yes, Epstein killed itself. But that's where all the good information about what cameras were working, what cameras weren't. Anybody could go to my Twitter, and I got a bunch of tweets sharing screenshots from that report. And that room right at the front of the camera where the lady or the guard walks in, that room actually isn't labeled in the floor plans. I assume it's just some kind of like boiler room or something like that. And sorry, what were your other parts of that? Oh, the old outdated camera system. So the funny thing with that is in the Inspector General's report goes into that. It's an old analog system. I'm assuming like VCR technology. And they hired a company in like a year before Epstein's death to update it and fix it. But the report goes into how the prison is so short staffed that they don't have any money for technicians. They keep having to use all their budget to pay guards. And so even though they contracted a company to fix it, they didn't have any faculty to, work on the thing. Eventually a tech starts working on it in early August, like 3 days before Epstein kills himself. This tech guy is working on the cameras, and he's telling the inspector general that like, oh, I didn't have a key to get in this door, so I couldn't fix these wires, and just all these crazy coincidences. Like the day before Epstein was found dead, he was about to fix it, but like he wasn't authorized to work overtime or something like that. So he goes home with the project unfinished, and the very next day Epstein is found dead. And yeah, that's one hell of a coincidence.
Yeah, it's all I was like reading I was like reading through that stuff and it all seems like on the surface a lot of it when you just hear it like sort of the quick version on the surface a lot of it seems like yeah maybe, but then once you do the minimal amount of reading you're like, well, this is actually insane. And then mix that with the fact where it's like, okay, so he's in high security prison, but then also, you know, there's no client list, and then also he did kill himself, but like, so you're like, wait, so there's like nothing to worry about because there's no client list, but also he's gonna fucking off himself at the same time.
Yeah, right. There was no evidence against that he was operating a sex trafficking operation, but yet he killed himself. I guess to steelman the DOJ's position, they've said implausibly, like this is total bullshit for anybody who knows about the Epstein story, but they're saying that Epstein and Maxwell, yes, they were sex trafficking, but they were sex trafficking these hundreds and hundreds of victims back and forth to each other. So it was just a two-man operation, and they weren't making any money. I guess they were just victimizing girls as part of this diabolical scheme that was limited to two people who just happened to
Yeah.
be connected to all these power brokers.
Yeah, no, that's what I learned to do is just like actually read the source material. And I was reading I guess it was the statement by the DOJ that was in the Axios article where
Mhm.
they like admitted in the article where it's like Jeffrey Epstein abused over 1,000 people. And then they're like, but it was just him. And
Yeah.
you're like, dude, if I interacted in my life with 1,000 people, I would have like there'd be a lot of extra things going on around that. You're telling me he sexually abused over 1,000 people, and there's like no one else that knows what happened? Like,
Yeah, or even like let's say we take the DOJ's word at face value, and okay, this was all just Epstein luring little girls and teenage girls to his mansion in Palm Beach where he'd have them give massages. I think anybody that watched that Netflix documentary, that's like the kind of the version that they present, that this was just like a perverted billionaire and he got away with it so long because he was a billionaire.
yeah,
But yeah, it just doesn't meet the smell test because the DOJ in that memo says that we don't have any evidence to charge any third parties. And we know that Epstein didn't just work with Maxwell, he had other like women in their 20s who might have been victimized at one point, but then they start working with Epstein to draw in other girls. So at the very least, like what the hell's going on with those other women that work with Maxwell and Epstein? Why aren't they being charged?
yeah, it's all very odd. It's all like a thing where you're like, even like best case scenario, it's logistically it's just like best case scenario, it's statistically impossible what you're saying is right. Yeah, I had a oh, by the way, yeah, in the chat, if you guys do have questions, hit them in there, throw them in the chat and I'll try to get them to Ken at the best time. But oh yeah, Derek here is a good question because about, they dropped the 11-hour video.
Mhm.
And this was an interesting thing too, with like a lot of the stuff they were dropping the past 2 days. Like so much of it went contrary to like how the videos were working and stuff. And Derek's asking about the 11-hour video. So did you see anything saying that that they like searched through that video and saw if they cut out any moment at any point?
Yeah, there's a missing minute that starts right at 11:59 p.m. and then the video restarts at 12 a.m. And that's actually my latest tweet, like literally 30 seconds before I jumped on with you, is that Pam Bondi at today's cabinet meeting said that that's because the system was antiquated and it's probably, and I actually believe her, this is probably the case that like the system switches videotapes right at
Yeah.
midnight. So while it's switching, that minute gets blacked out because it was exactly a minute. And again, this is a red herring though, because that camera doesn't show anything. So again, this is another distraction, in my opinion. People talking about this missing minute. That's a lot of the Epstein skeptics and the right wing is focused on this now. And that shouldn't be the focus. It should be on the fact that the video is pointless and that the real camera that mattered wasn't working.
Yeah. It is funny too, because yeah, it is funny too because the last time they saw him was at like 10:40 p.m., right?
That's when he was put in his
Put in the
cell. Yes.
cell, and then they didn't see him the next morning till 6:30. Oh, which that was another thing. Weren't they supposed to do in every half-hour checks or something?
Yeah, they were supposed to do half-hour checks, and they actually put in the prison logs that they did do those checks, and that was forgery. And I
Mm,
think that's what the guards were charged with, like misdemeanor falsifying prison logs. And then the charges were later dropped, and they got a sweetheart deal. But yeah, that did happen.
yeah. And then so last time they talked to him is 10:40. They come back to his cell at 6:30 a.m. The fact that there's a skip in the tape at midnight, like it's so funny because I'm 35. That was the whole fear when I was a kid of like 2000 is like all the computers are gonna hit
Yeah.
zero and explode, and you're like, yeah, man, that's also a fucking thing. But that is that is the name of the game though, is try to focus on whatever like the little thing is and sort of miss the bigger picture of all that and whatnot. But
Mhm.
yeah, I was looking through some stuff about the actual suicide, and that was what I don't know where to exactly go with that, but that was another one that was like pretty obvious. It was like how the neck broke and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just posted, I tagged you as like he was found in a sitting position with his butt just like an inch off the ground. And so, like, who has the discipline to kill themselves like that, where you're not hanging off the floor, or once you jump, you can't change your mind and put your feet anywhere. Supposedly, he had a rope on the top of the bunk bed and sat down to where just his butt was off the floor. But at any moment, he could have like stood up. So I don't think that somebody could kill themselves like that, because if you try to hold your breath, eventually you'll involuntarily just start to breathe again. And I think that would have been the case. Like he just panics and stands up. It doesn't pass the smell test as far as that. And then, yes, as you mentioned, the brother, so the New York medical examiner conducted an autopsy and ruled it a suicide, but the brother hired his own private person who did an independent exam and found those three broken bones in the front. I don't know what the anatomy is called, but
Yeah.
it indicates that he was actually attacked. And I guess people who just hang themselves usually don't have uh, broken bones, broken bones like that.
Yeah, that's what I was watching yesterday. They were saying that like the way that those three broken bones, they're like it's like next to impossible to do that with just hanging yourself. It has to be from like strangulation or some other
Yeah.
blunt
And
force.
and let's not forget that so he's imprisoned in July 2019, and in that first few weeks he supposedly tries to kill himself once. And this is when he had a cellmate that Nicholas Tartaglione, I think, this giant cop
Oh
that was
yeah.
known, he was like dealing steroids, like super massive guy. And the cop said that he's sleeping in the bottom bunk, and all of a sudden he feels a leg hit him, and it's like Epstein trying to kill himself. So he calls the guards. The guards come, they put Epstein on suicide watch. And when Epstein first spoke to the guards, he said, "My cellmate tried to kill me." And then he later backed away from those claims, according to the report. Uh, but yeah, that to me that's very fishy. Where it's like, well, somebody tried to kill me. They take him off suicide watch in the days before August 10th when he was found dead, and so a lot of people think like, well, was the steroid cop? Did he finish the job? According to the Inspector General's report, that inmate, his cellmate, was actually moved to another prison on the day that Epstein died. So I don't think it was him. But there were other inmates in that hallway. So we don't know the identity of the other inmates that were close to his cell.
Do they know how many were in the hallway?
Yes, there were two inmates housed in one cell across from him, and then one other inmate like down the hallway, kind of isolated. And I just think, like, when I read that, I'm picturing like the two inmates are like undercover agents sent to kill Epstein, and that one inmate at the end of the hall is like probably hearing all this crazy shit going on. That's just my imagination running away with me, but I think it's plausible.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because it makes it remind because I was watching a bunch of like like mainstream not mainstream anymore, but corporate press or whatever you want to call them, like the CNNs and the MSNBCs. I was watching those just to like bone up on the info and see the different perspectives, yada yada yada. And you're saying like the prisoner thing, and you're like, oh yeah, even in all those, they were always just like, yeah, there's no like they didn't see any other sort of type of person enter the prison, and that like they just kind of like repeat that and get your mindset in that. And I guess it happened to me because I'm listening to you talk and I'm just like, oh yeah, it could have been a fucking prisoner. Because that's the big thing they do a lot of times where they're like, oh, so you're saying there's just like a million people and what? They're sneaking through little holes in the prison? You're like, or the guy that's in there for life, they probably made him a nice deal and got him to fucking choke the guy out. It's
Yeah, I
not.
mean, I think that's the most likely situation. I do keep it open that Epstein may actually have killed himself and they let him do that. The reason I say that is because he did sign his last will and testament, I think August 8th, 2 days before he was found dead. So maybe he was saying, I'm screwed. I want to get out of here. It still would be a huge scandal if they let him kill himself. But yeah, to your point, yeah, I think people try to set it up like, oh, Hillary Clinton snuck into the prison. And it's like, no, dude, you know how these cases work. It was probably just another inmate.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton walked in, cracked open a baby, got superpowers,
Yeah, exactly.
and threw Epstein into the fourth dimension. You're like, yeah, I don't think that happened. No, you know what's funny? Actually, giving a shout out to the chat. I think it was Derek in the chat threw that out yesterday on stream where it was like, that was the first time I heard that is maybe they let Epstein kill himself. And then I was like looking through some of the stuff and there was like little things like they left extra, what was it? They like left extra bedding in there, like
Yeah.
just little things that he could have actually killed himself with.
Yeah, and he was taken off suicide watch, so you're supposed to keep him in a cell where he doesn't have things where he could self-harm. And they were worried about that because this goes into another intriguing aspect where he was allowed to place an unmonitored phone call the day before he was found dead. Really bizarre. The whole manager of the prison, the warden was out of state, so the unit manager was left in charge. And after Epstein leaves his meeting with his lawyers, the unit manager tells one of the guards, like, oh, hey, I'm taking Epstein to make a call to his mother. His mother's been dead since 2004. The unit manager takes him to a shower and plugs in his phone to a legal line. So there's, I guess, two lines in prison, a personal line where all the calls are recorded. If I'm calling you from prison, they want to make sure we're not conspiring. But then they have a separate line for if you're talking to your attorneys, they're not allowed to listen to that. So the unit manager takes him to a shower and plugs him into the legal line so he's allowed to talk unmonitored. And they found out he was talking to somebody with a New York City area code, but that person told investigators that she was actually in Belarus. They had like this 25-minute conversation, and we don't know what was said. You know, less than 12 hours later, Epstein's found dead. The reason I bring this up, not only because it's intriguing in itself, but the unit manager talks about, well, I was worried about leaving him alone with the phone because he could harm himself with the cord. So obviously this was like an issue that was present on the prison facility's mind on that last day. They were apparently worried about him hanging himself with a cord, but then when he's finally placed in his cell, they're not worried about all this, you know, fabric and these prison uniform or the orange jumpsuits that he could use to hang himself.
Yeah.
It's just contradictions after contradictions.
Well, and also that, you know what, that also makes me think about like, because a lot of times when the government will make statements, they won't, I mean, they'll obviously flat out lie about a lot of stuff, but then they get caught and they'll be like, well, actually, and then try to quantify it. But then there is also the time too where it's like I was saying this yesterday where they're like, there is no Epstein client list. And I was like, I mean, it's not like he would keep invoices and just be like, all right, Bill, what'd you have? 7 kids? So I'm going to hit you with 10 grand. You know what I mean? So it's like he knew who the people were. So in the same fact, it's like it almost could be like if they're saying like he committed suicide, that could also include we let him commit suicide,
Yes.
which is sort of killing him through the transitive property.
That's exactly right. And the client list, there really is no client list. That's kind of another red herring, like this issue of the missing minute. What Epstein had is a black book that's been public for over 10 years. It was leaked by Epstein's gardener to the journalist Nick Bryant. Yeah,
Dude,
go ahead.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. We've been making this joke. So you know I'm a comedian, and on my comedy podcast, we've interviewed like all types of people, and we've interviewed like porn stars back in the day, and we talked to this lady who was like, I've been in the biggest gangbang in the world. She had the client list. She had the flight logs on her phone. I go, dude, if she has it, you can get it. If the lady who's been in the biggest gangbang in the world has the flight logs, you can find it, dude.
Yeah, the thing with the Black Book, it was essentially a client list. According to the Gardner, certain names are underlined, and those were like the people involved in Epstein's illicit operations. The names that weren't underlined were just people he knew.
Yeah.
Trump's name was underlined, so I don't know. Take that for what you will, but Trump's name was underlined. And last thing I'll say is the Gardner was charged for leaking the Black Book, and so he remains. Him and Maxwell are the only people that actually were criminally charged in this whole thing.
Wait, he got charged for leaking the Black Book?
Yeah, the Gardner did. He leaked it to Nick Bryant, the journalist, and
Yeah.
Nick Bryant published it on Gawker, and it's been public for 10 years. But yeah, the Gardner got charged for that.
What's the charge?
I think it might have been under seal or something. It was just like leaking some kind of evidence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. Yeah, that's all very interesting. Oh shit, what was I gonna ask you? I was talking about the client list. I don't remember what I was gonna ask. What's your you report on this stuff every day, every week, every month, so you're more locked into the like political discourse and stuff, and you're more locked in on the personalities. I knew about Dan Bongino occasionally. I'd see his face pop up on Rumble, but I couldn't tell you a thing he thought. I was like, he's probably a conservative guy. I heard about Kash Patel when he got nominated and stuff like that. And then when they're doing those interviews, talking the way they are about being like, he definitely killed himself, all this other stuff. Are you like, how crazy is it? Like how they are now? Is it like a crazy 180 from how they used to be? Or is it not that as wacky as people are making it out to be?
I mean, it's not surprising to me. I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I never paid attention to Kash Patel or Dan Bongino like the last 5 years or so. I kind of knew who they were, but their content kind of struck me as like just boomer slop. So like I just didn't care. Like I didn't have anything against them. Kash Patel made his bones. He was in the DOJ, and then when all the Russiagate stuff happened, he was working for the Senate Homeland Security Committee or one of those committees, and he unlocked a lot of the information showing about how the FBI was doctoring FISA warrants and doing a lot of shady stuff in Russiagate. So to give Patel a little bit of credit, he did legitimate work. He's not just like some blowhard radio guy. He does have some bona fides as an investigator, although it seemed like pretty low-hanging fruit to me. Like if you put me in and gave me a congressional subpoena power, I think I could do better than Patel. In any event, that's kind of how he became famous as the guy who uncovered the plot against Trump, and he rode that to the directorship. Bongino, for his part, he used to be a Secret Service agent. He worked on Obama's detail, and then he quit the Secret Service around 2012 or 2013, had a failed congressional run, and then became this big bombastic radio guy. And I would suspect it more of Bongino. I think he's kind of a spook. He's always been disingenuous. Researching for my book about the Trump shooting, I read a history on the Secret Service, and there was a cocaine scandal in like 2012 where all Obama's security guards went down with him to Colombia, and they started partying with Colombian prostitutes,
Oh yeah, I heard about this.
including some that were linked to the cartels, which is a huge security concern. I would say that opens Secret Service agents to blackmail possibilities. But in any event, one of the peoples in the scandal was Joe Bongino, who's Dan Bongino's brother. And So Dan Bongino, at a couple, maybe around this point, he's like starting his radio show, becoming a big personality, bashing the Secret Service where he used to work, never discloses that his own brother was involved in this Colombian prostitution scandal. It only came to light because a reporter named Ryan Grimm for The Intercept found about it, called Bongino. He said, well, I didn't tell people because, nobody asked me. Like total disingenuous crap. Fast forward 10 years later, I'm researching the Trump shooting, and I learned that he worked with at least two of the agents who were part of the security failures. They all worked together in New York City, and then they all worked together on Obama's detail. And then two of these guys, one of them is the special agent in charge of the Pittsburgh office. The other one's the deputy in the Pittsburgh office. And, all last year while he's bashing the Secret Service, he never disclosed that he worked with these two guys. So I'm not suggesting there's any kind of conspiracy, but again, it just shows you what kind of guy he is, just totally disingenuous, not telling his listeners the full truth about his own background. So yeah, I could talk shit about these guys all day. I don't know if that answers your question sufficiently.
No, I think it does because yeah, no, I think it does because that's, it is a thing. Well, it's this weird thing where you're like I remember they talked about it a bunch where when Trump was running for president the first time, and they were like, "Oh, but Hillary has way more experience." And I go, "Yeah, being the devil." And you're like, and at the time it was a thing. It's like, dude, I'll take a risk on the fucking real estate business owner who is the most egotistical man in the world over the Antichrist. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? But then at the same time, like you said, it's super easy to like compromise a person and shit like that. And you start realizing, I don't know. I just sit back and I go, maybe we just stop doing this whole federal government thing. But that's another conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, oh, it's gonna. You try not to get like nihilistic or whatever. You're like, but you're just like, oh, so it's gonna suck ass either way. All right, cool. But no, I never knew that about him. That Obama, it's so funny. I never hear about that. Then I talk to dudes like you, and I always get reminded of it. I was like, oh yeah, Obama had like a huge Secret Service hooker scandal back in the day.
Oh yeah, and the cartel link is the most intriguing to me. Like it's not just boys being boys and partying. It's like some deep shit, and I think it might have compromised the agency, even more so.
Really?
Oh yeah, because again, cartels they're gonna blackmail you. They're gonna do all the stuff that we're talking about with Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, this is very, very closely related. If you're some Secret Service agent making, who knows, 95 grand a year, this is your whole identity. You're big, you think you're a tough guy, special forces, the counter assault team, and all of a sudden somebody shows you a video of you cheating on your wife. Your own, man, your own. So that could have led to the security failures of last year. I think these agents being compromised.
Oh, that's crazy. Damn. I'm gonna have to look into that more. Yeah, you're talking about Epstein with you talk about compromising him there. Epstein was doing the blackmail. Obviously the word on the street with a lot of people, Epstein is Mossad. I've heard a bunch of people I trust say that. But I have personally not, like I was saying before with the Epstein killing himself thing. The second you like scratch the surface, there's a bunch of things that pop up and you're like, oh, that's like makes it seem super obvious. What are the things with the if you're aware of them, what are the things with like the Epstein Mossad connection that when you like scratch that surface that make things become a little bit more like, yeah, I think this is definitely this.
Well, I've reported on a lawsuit. A Jane Doe 200 is the victim's name. The 200th victim filed something last year that explicitly accused Epstein of being a Mossad agent. The victim says this is the early 2000s. She gets raped by Epstein and she's thinking about reporting it. And Epstein tells her that I'm Mossad. I work with the Saudis too. The victims have made false claims, so we can't just take that word as gold. But to your point, there's a bunch of there's a confluence of evidence that points to Epstein being intelligence. There's Alex Acosta, the U.S. attorney for Florida. When Epstein was arrested initially in 2009, he was given a sweetheart deal, and the U.S. attorney later said that he was told that Epstein belonged to intelligence and to back away. Specifically with Mossad, we know Epstein was business partners with the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. We know his island, his building is painted like the Israeli flag. We know Ghislaine Maxwell's, I got the book over here on my shelf. His dad was Robert Maxwell. His nickname was Israel Super Spy. He was this big, yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, his father-in-law's nickname was "I work for Israel."
Yeah, exactly.
His middle name was Blackmail Senators. What else?
Exactly. And probably even more damning connection is relationship with Les Wexner, the founder of Victoria's Secret. Basically runs all of Columbus, Ohio. He was part of a group in the 80s called the Power Group. I think the Power Group or the Mega Group or something kind of like very ominous sounding, where it's this group of Jewish billionaires whose like the organization's explicit mission was to support Israel. And Columbus around this time, it's like a hub for Iran-Contra. There's all this spooky stuff going on that Epstein and Les Wexner were involved in. And then he makes Epstein his power of attorney. I think he basically sells him a mansion in New York City for like $30. All this crazy stuff with Les Wexner.
And also, Epstein just had no resume to justify any of this stuff happening for him, right?
Yeah, he doesn't even have a college degree. He's everybody says that he's this brilliant math whiz, but he got a job at Bear Stearns during like the late 80s savings and loan crisis. They were charged with a bunch of financial crimes. He escapes that. So everything he touched turns to a disaster. I think the one thing he was really good at was tax avoidance, like helping people. That's why he was down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, working with these tax havens to help his clients. Like I think Leon Black, the head of Apollo, like one of these hedge funds, was a client to Epstein. So he was good at that. To finish off with, was he Mossad, though? We'll get a little spicy here. I don't subscribe to this theory, but I've been reading articles on Substack by some people who think that Epstein was Mossad. And then in the Obama era, around 2010, after his arrest, he gets flipped by kind of like the American Anglo establishment to work for America against Israel. This is around the time Obama's working for the Iran deal. Like, to Obama's credit, he wasn't totally owned by the Israelis. And from what I've read, the theory is that the CIA director, William Barr, he was Biden's director, was actually Epstein's handler around this time. And so Epstein starts providing information against the Israelis. And that's why when Trump gets back into power, Bill Barr, super Zionist attorney general, the same guy that covered up Iran-Contra and Epstein scandals in the early 90s, is attorney general again. And that's when they arrest Epstein and kill him because he had flipped against the Mossad. That's the theory I've heard. I'm not subscribing to it, but it is interesting, and I think it should be explored further.
Yeah, and it sounds like a sick 90s action movie, so that's what I'm gonna believe now. No, that no, I mean, because you are right, because it was I'm not too deep into the weeds on all that stuff, but yeah, it wasn't Obama had I heard a lot of people saying like Obama's nuclear deal with Iran was good. People actually liked it, and he was like doing some good stuff. So I see where they're coming from. Obviously, this is the first time ever hearing of it, so I'm not going to be like definitive yay or nay. But yeah,
there's even the Bill Clinton connection. We know Clinton was working on the two-state solution in the 90s. So like these guys, I'm not saying like, oh, Epstein, he had a face turn and he started being a good guy. I'm saying these are like warring factions, like Game of Thrones style,
Yeah.
and he just switched flat factions. I mean, like I think Bill Clinton was probably blackmailed by the Israelis in the 90s to tank the two-state solution. So yeah, these things are very complicated.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I think it's way more of like it's probably way more of just like, yo, who can cut me a better deal and
Yeah,
stuff like that. I think like obviously there's a handful of true believers, but I think a lot of people around it are just like, what's gonna keep me good or what's gonna get me paid and shit like that. So
for sure.
I could see any crazy shit like that happening. That's damn, that's fascinating, and that's why I bring you on, Ken, because I go, I've never heard that before.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. If people are interested in that theory, the guy who's written a lot about it, and I'm not endorsing this guy, his name's Chuck Johnson, Charles Johnson. He's like a pretty famous or infamous right wing troll kind of guy. A lot of connections. He knew Epstein. He was an FBI informant. So, again, I'm not this guy's friend or anything. I don't vouch for him, but he knows a lot. He knows a lot. And he has a Substack. I think it's like Charles Johnson's Traveling Adventures. If people want to go read into that, go knock yourself out.
Who's the because that's the thing you hear a lot of times where like I don't know if you get into the UFO stuff, but I've gotten into it a little bit more the past year or two, ever since like the government started actually acknowledging it way more. And I go, that's interesting. Why are they doing that? And then you see I forget what the fucking dude's name was, but he was on Rogan like probably almost a year ago at this point. But it's whenever you see like in the conspiracy world or the alien world or any of that, and the dude comes on and he looks like a high school football coach, and you're like, you find out he's like ex-military, ex-marines. You're like, I don't know about all that. And then you see all these different. It's just hard to tell who's like. I always joke, like I think like Sean Ryan. I think he's more of a useful idiot where he'll be like, wow, that's crazy. And that's why we need to be afraid of terrorism at every turn. And we need to go bomb more brown people. It's like, I think he really believes that. They just know he's going to pump out the proper message that they want. I'm just curious because, I've talked to you before about I think you called it the Fed files, talking about the militia group and stuff like that. Who's your dude who you're like, oh, he's not just like a useful idiot. He's just like a flat out like fake person. He's lying. Are there any dudes that light up like that for you?
So I got to disagree with you and say for me it's Sean Ryan.
Yeah.
I think somebody like Benny Johnson is a useful idiot, and there's some conservative commentators, but
Mm.
remember Sean Ryan is former CIA. Not only that, he worked on black ops in South America. He was involved in like cocaine trafficking.
Oh, he
So
did all that stuff?
yeah, yeah. He was on a podcast with Megan Kelly where he talks about he claims that like, oh, he's stationed in the CIA in South America and he starts getting addicted to drugs and then trafficking them. But I mean, it's obvious he was definitely doing black ops. And yeah, that's not really a salacious allegation. It's pretty well documented. So you should go check that out. I don't think he's a useful idiot. I think he's a spook.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look into that one more. Yeah, you know what it is? I get thrown off because he will have like, well, his podcast will be funny because he'll have certain interviews where it'll just be a guy's like, this is what's happening with child sex trafficking and all that stuff online. This is what I'm doing to help. And then he'll have my favorite interviews of his is when they have like former military guys talking about operations where they like murdered a fucking 1,000 people, and they're just sitting there like, and I want to go back right fucking now.
Yeah, it's like an alumni club kind of, you know.
Yeah, they're fucking wild. A few more things. Are there anything going on with the I know you're talking about like there's some big distractions where people are obsessed about the skip at midnight and stuff like that. Is there anything that, with doing your research that is sort of like a big deal that like people aren't focusing on, or is there anything that's kind of like you wish there was more attention on or something like that?
I'll say I was the only guy for like weeks, or ever since Dan Bongino announced, "Oh, we've got footage of inside the prison." I'm the only guy sharing these diagrams that show which cameras were recording and which weren't. And I'm finally starting to see some other big accounts share these diagrams. So, welcome to the party, guys. Like, good. I'm not saying they're stealing my ideas. Like, this should be spreading. So, I would say that, just like the obvious falsehood of Bongino's statement, it's been disproved in all these diagrams. What else? No, I think I gave you the spiciest thing I can. Is Epstein was Mossad but flipped to work for the CIA. That's about the best I've got for you.
Oh yeah, I gotta be honest. You were saying that, and I go, "Oh, the TikTok clip I'm gonna make is gonna be so good, Ken."
Nice,
Oh,
nice.
oh, the subtitles under your voice. There's gonna be emojis. It's gonna be beautiful, Ken. I think I think that's a good place to wrap it up. This was fucking great, Ken Silva. Thank you for coming on. Where can the people find you if they want to read your work and read your tweets and all that?
Yeah, I'm a headlineusa.com is the main thing. We've been republishing antiwar.com articles. We've got another strong, libertarian right winger guy, Jose Nino, is now my deputy editor. So making big moves over there to kind of be the leading paleo libertarian type of publication in the country. That's our aim. So go there on Twitter at JD_cashless. And yeah, that's it. That's about it. I'm really looking forward to talking to you. Is it next week about the Trump shooting? I
Yeah,
know a lot more about that.
perfect. Yeah, because I do better in the interviews when I like bone up on it. So I'm gonna give myself 2 weeks to catch up. But the 15th, Ken's gonna be back. We're gonna be talking about the Trump assassination attempt. And he's like writing a book on it. So Ken, like he said before, he's confident calling himself an expert in that.
Yes, sir.
So I'm pretty fucking excited about that because that's another one that Ken's pointing out a lot of shit that a lot of people don't notice. So that's gonna be a good stream in 2 weeks, guys. So be there for that. Chat's showing a lot of love. They're saying thanks for the stream. Hell yeah. All right, man. Fuck yeah. The guys appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you so much for coming on, Ken. Have a good day. All right. Ordinary people. Tapes is the man. We just had him on Drag the Lake. Is Ken back? Why did Ken come back? What the hell? Ken,
Yeah, sorry, my internet just crapped out. I'll jump off, but I wanted to make sure I didn't just like hang up on you or anything.
oh, no. No problem, man. Not at all. No, I didn't think you did. I just thought I was like, bye, and then whatever. But thank you very much, Ken.
Okay, cool. All right, we'll talk to you soon. See you later.
All right, man. You're the man, Ken. Have a good
All
day.
right, bye.
Bye. What a cool fucking dude. That made me laugh. Yo, that's so funny. That's so fucking funny.